charging onto the ball. Reece Walsh has lit it up.
A 10 out of 10 performance, one of the most complete grand final performance, and yeah, without Reece Walsh, Brisbane do not win this game.
Well, Mick, we just said one of the great grand finals. Brisbane win 26-22. It was a Reece Walsh show. And if Brisbane were going to win this game, he needed to stand up. I tell you what, he did more than that. He was unbelievable tonight. Yeah, the most complete performance I've seen in a grand final in a long time. Obviously, we don't have to go too far back to look at a memorable performance in terms of Nathan Cleary a few years ago up against the Broncos. But this had everything from Reece Walsh. Defensively was outstanding. Set-up tries was just, a 10 out of 10 performance, one of the most complete grand final performance. And yeah, without Reece Walsh, Brisbane do not win this game. Well, that's the thing, Mick, right? It wasn't just what he did with the ball, because he's always dynamite with the ball. It was what he did defensively tonight that I thought was really eye-catching. Couple of tackles on Ryan Pappenhausen that really saved the game for Brisbane, really. So it was just a complete, as you said, a complete performance. I think we gave him 11 out of 10 in the Telegraph. 11, that's how good it was. It's hard to argue. Just that one play on Pappenhausen where Pappenhausen burst through and Reece just ran him down. Yeah. Just ran him down. Pappenhausen scores that try almost against any other fullback in the game except for Reece Walsh, and that was pivotal in the game. So I just think he was just ridiculously good, Reece Walsh, in so many ways. I just think that, obviously Melbourne led 22-12. I think it was 22-12 at half-time, if my memory serves me correct. And they looked at the game under control. When Jerome Hughes sliced over, you thought, well, they're going to go on with this, Melbourne. And typically you would expect they do, but the second half they couldn't get any possession early on. Particularly they got penned down in their own half, and they just struggled to get out of it. Yeah, it's what we said in the lead-up, the fact that Brisbane are trailed by a lot in games this year, but they don't care. Yeah. They don't fear what the scoreline is. There's no scoreline pressure when it comes to the Brisbane Broncos because they can just turn it on. They've got so many strike players, and I know we're banging on about Reece Walsh because he was ridiculously good, but the second best player on the field for mine was Ezra Mam. Yeah. His impact off the bench, and he came on at a time. Well, he came alive in that second half, right? But they were on the back foot when he came onto the field. But I just thought his injection, his speed, he was really good. What a luxury to have him as well when Adam Reynolds goes off the field with that calf problem as well. And obviously he's a pivotal part. And then they lose Ben Hunt with the HIA. And Ezra Mam's there to sort of take the reins a little bit. And you're right, Mick, I thought he was brilliant, Ezra Mam. I thought they should have started him actually in this game, but it was a masterstroke by Madge to bring him into the game after the early sting was out of it. Yeah, no doubt. I would have started him, but how can you knock Madge? I know. Two-time premiership winner, two different clubs, joins a rare breed. No one's ever won it at three clubs. No. Right? That's how rare this list is of coaches that have won it at two clubs, but we should touch on him because he's copped a lot of flack this year, Madge, for his methods and
not
the
just
way,
this year,
in recent years.
For a long time, since the back end of South Sydney, right?
Yeah. And the West Tigers obviously was a failed stint for him, and there's no hiding that, but he's done a remarkable job. I mean, midway through this year, they looked in all sorts, Brisbane, but the way he turned them around, particularly in the latter stages of this season, then to get them over the line in this final series, it's a magnificent performance by Madge. Yeah. I've said this before, but I feel like Michael Maguire and Brisbane are the perfect mix. Yeah. Because Madge has got this hard edge. He's going to work these guys to the ground. They're going to know what grit and determination is, right? But what he doesn't coach is that natural instinct that Reece Walsh has, right? Or Ezra Mam or Tony Staggs was quiet tonight in a sense, right? But it's this blend of Madge's hardness, that steeliness that he's brought in, sprinkled with this absolute class that you cannot coach, and you can't put a genie in that bottle, right? You can't contain it, right? So I just feel like it's a perfect blend, and huge move from the Broncos 12 months ago to sack Kevin Walters to bring Madge in, and copped a lot of heat, particularly at the start of the year. But is it vindicated now? Well, Mick? What do you think? Yeah, of course. Would appear so. Of course, in the first year they've won a comp. Doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter what happens here on in now for the Brisbane Broncos and the hierarchy who sacked Kevin Walters. They brought Madge in. They got rid of a favourite son. And the only outcome to shut everyone up was a premiership, and they've delivered in their first year. We should touch on Melbourne because, as I said, half-time, 22-12 up, Jerome Hughes scores. They look home and hosed, but the second half they were disappointed. As I said, they couldn't get any possession, any territory. And, Ryan Pappenhausen made a couple of busts, and a year ago, 2 years ago, maybe Ryan Pappenhausen turns it into points, but that was sort of a bit of a stark difference between the two sides. I mean, Reece Walsh was so good that sort of, I guess, in those moments when Ryan couldn't get the job done, it sort of highlighted that, I guess.
Yeah, it was a weird game from the Storm. They'll rue this one more than last year's grand final because they were in this game. They were a Reece Walsh away from winning this grand final. Where last year, I don't think they actually went with Penrith at all. They looked a bit tentative throughout the grand final. Where this year they started. I know they conceded the first try, but the rest of that first half, they were pretty good.
Yeah.
Right, but the second half, they just got blown off the park and they couldn't go another gear. They lost Jack Howarth early, and that sort of went with their rotation a bit. Alec McDonald came on and then came off, so they were down a few troops early. I just didn't think their bench was terrible. There was no punch off that bench.
They got a bit of soul searching during the off season. Mick, obviously they've got to make decisions about, as we said, Ryan Pappenhausen's could go to R360. They've got to decide whether they keep him round or offer him the chance to leave. I think Nelson Sofa-Solomon has played his last game for that football club. They've got the Cameron Munster situation to resolve, Jonah Pezzett. There's a lot of moving parts with Melbourne they need to sort out in this off-season. But if they can sort that out and get that done, that's still a quality side that will challenge for a premiership next year.
We've got Cam Munster's future as well,
Yeah.
like what his long-term future may be with Jonah Pezzett waiting in the wing. So, there's going to be some change in Melbourne. But, whilst they still have Harry Grant, Jerome Hughes locked in long-term, either Munster or Pezzett in as well. So I just feel like their middles let them down a little. I think their bench let them down, really. Like, you look at their bench, I just thought they had no impact. No impact whatsoever.
Actually, you touch on that, Mick. We should touch on that. There was a big moment in that second half. Tui Kamikamica came off the bench, looked like he'd score. He scores that try. And again, a moment of brilliance when Reece Walsh knocks the ball out of his hands. If he scores that try, I think that game's over.
That's what I'm talking about. When we rewind and look at Reece Walsh's game, it's the defensive efforts. You talk about the Pappenhausen one, and then again, the Tua Kamikamica, he should have scored. Should have swallowed that ball, scored. I'm going to say game over there. I don't think Brisbane, I know they've got the attacking brilliance, but I don't think they find their way back against the Melbourne Storm side who can manipulate the game well. So that was a huge moment. Tui should have scored, but Reece Walsh magic, again, defensively, was enough to get the job done.
Are we looking at a Brisbane dynasty now, Mick? What do you think?
I don't know. They're so hard. Like, we just...
With Reece Walsh locked in long term, they need to resolve Payne. They need to get Payne Haas locked away, right? But
there's Staggs, Carrigan in there long term, Ezra in there long term.
Yeah.
Like,
there's the bedrock of a side that can.
They're a top four side next year, obviously.
Yeah.
Right. I think we've been spoiled by Penrith over the last few years, where we know how hard it was to go back to back, let alone win 4 in a row. So, they're definitely a premiership contender next season, no doubt, because the roster doesn't change too much.
Mick, as good as Reece Walsh was, and he was brilliant, there was a moment in that first half when he was penalised. It was a high shot on Xavier Coates. He was coming across and cover, hit him with his shoulder in the face. Early in the season, I reckon that's a sin bin.
Round 15, round 16,
but he
round 17.
He doesn't get sin bin. He stays on the field. What was your view of that incident?
Yeah, I think it was borderline sin bin. Right, I don't think it was a clear-cut sin bin, so I know it's a grand final. We shouldn't officiate differently, but obviously we do.
Yeah.
Right, so if he got sin bin, I wouldn't be sitting here blowing up about it, but I don't think it was clear-cut sin bin. Yeah. I would have binned him.
And they look at mitigation there, right? And Xavier Coates did fall. He fell a little bit, right? He dropped a little bit, but it was still a shoulder to the face, and it was flush in the face, and he didn't miss him. I'm with you. I think at points this year, that's a sin bin. If they'd sin bin him, I wouldn't have had an issue.
And that's probably the best reflection of it. It was how similar was it to the Trent Liero one at the end?
Yeah. I think Liero
was worse,
maybe
a bit worse because everyone was a bit more upright and a bit more reckless as well, right?
It was a bit more reckless, I reckon, the Liero one.
So if that's the benchmark for a sin bin, or maybe they got the Reece one right.
It was significant, right? Because then in that 10-minute period, I'm pretty sure Reece Walsh scored a try during that period.
It was
an individual try.
Yeah, it was one of the great tries, right? And matched by Jerome Hughes a couple of minutes later, but we're not going to be speaking about that because of the end result. But I honestly run out of words to describe Reece Walsh. Like, how do you... It was the most complete performance that we've seen.
Yeah.
The blistering speed, the defensive efforts, the ability to work on both sides of the field. Yeah. It was a masterclass. So, one of the great grand final performances.
In terms of Brisbane, I mentioned before about, do we see a dynasty here? Look, they're going to have a little bit of change, Brisbane, in the coming years, right? I mean, the halves maybe with Reynolds and Hunt sort of towards the end of their career, and I wonder whether now, after Adam Reynolds has won a premiership and goes off with that calf injury. Maybe Adam reconsiders his future. He's obviously signed for another year. This would be a great way to go out if he was to go out.
Yeah, well, Ezra's got to start, right? Like,
Yeah.
when he's fully fit, Ezra's a walk-up start. Does Adam Reynolds walk out as a premiership winner? I wouldn't begrudge him if he did. And he's come in and done the job that they wanted at Brisbane. You look at when he arrived, we've got 1 grand final appearance, 1 premiership.
Yeah.
Job done for Adam Reynolds as the Brisbane Broncos.
Yeah.
Some massive news out of the grand final regarding Payne Haas's future. Reedy, we spoke about it, or we had it a couple of weeks ago, that he was linked with R360. But you have a few more details around it.
Yeah, look, the end of a Zoom meeting this week with R360, him and his management. The R360 officials reached out to his management. Look, there'd been some talk around Payne Haas, and someone acting for Payne Haas had spoken to R360. They've now reached out to his actual manager. His manager said, look, we'll have a discussion with you. We'll hear what you've got to say. We just want to get the grand final out the way. So now the grand final's out the way. They'll have a Zoom meeting at some point this week with R360, Payne Haas. And my understanding is we're talking pretty significant money for Payne Haas. He's got a year to go in his deal. Brisbane obviously want to keep him. They're locked in talks with him over an extension, but he could have an incredible amount of money thrown at him by R360, and the Broncos can't. No NRL club can match that.
Well, it'd have to be huge money, Reedy, right? Because if he was on the open market or even at Brisbane, you're expecting him to earn at least $1.3 million if he remains at Brisbane. If he left Brisbane, we're talking 1.5, 1.6 million without third parties, without endorsements. That's just bang on the cap. So you must be talking an offer well above $2 million.
Well, I'm told it'll be the most significant offer ever to a rugby league player. It'll dwarf what Sonny Bill Williams got all those years ago, and that is ridiculous money. And Payne's obviously, look, we all know Payne's situation. He's basically a guardian for his younger brothers. He's got a young family. He's married, got a young family. It would be a monumental decision for Payne Haas to leave Brisbane or leave South East Queensland and play in some fledgling rugby union competition that travels the world. It'd be a huge decision for him, but we're talking inordinate amounts of money at the moment. So it's going to be a big call. But as I said, those discussions this week, Mick, at some point this week, and make no mistake, the game's under siege at the moment from R360.
Yeah, well, he's not alone. Ryan Pappenhausen, Zach Lomax, Roger Tuivasa, Sheck are just some of the names which have been linked. Jai Gray are just some of the names that have been linked. What'd you make of Payne tonight?
Mate, I thought he was quiet early, and then he spent a long time off the field. Actually, it surprised me how long he spent off the field. I thought his second stint was great. If you look at his stats at the end of the game, he ran for a lot of metres, but a lot of them, I think he only had 4 runs in his first stint, which is very un-Payne-like. Normally, Payne he'd spend the entire first half on the field and run for over 100 metres, but I think he only had 4 runs for 28 metres or something his first stint, if I've got that right. So, but I thought his second stint, Mick, I thought he was great in his second stint, and that helped, obviously, Brisbane that second half, and they needed to find points and get over the line.
And when you talk about dynasties around the Brisbane Broncos, well, it centres around Reece Walsh at the back and Payne Haas in the middle.
Yeah, I know. So, if this Brisbane team's going to keep contending for premierships, they've got to move heaven and earth to keep Payne Haas. So I think the other guy, actually, Mick, tonight, we haven't touched on him. We didn't touch on him when we did our wrap, was Paddy Carrigan. I thought was huge tonight as well, and obviously he missed the prelim, Pat Carrigan, he did. So when the two of them are working together, Brisbane's a different footy team, right? They got Reece and those two blokes banging through the middle of the field. They're a potent footy team. So Pat's obviously locked into a long-term deal. I know there's talk about him renegotiating that because he's not on a huge money, Pat Carrigan. But if they can keep Pat Carrigan, keep Payne Haas out of the clutches of R360, keep Reece Walsh, you've got the foundations of a premiership contender for a long time to come. Well, Mick, we should wrap it up. There's only one thing you wrap this night up on, and that's on Reece.
Can we wrap it up? Because your
Walsh.
Queensland gibbering Broncos mates are punishing us.
It was an epic performance.
It was
the best.
The best. The best.
What more can you say?
The most complete performance in a grand final.
Much like your performance on this podcast has been the most complete podcast performance I've seen in a long time.
Thank you, Brent.
Thank you very much.